The creator is asking that stitch this if you know the answer. Why did witchcraft not work during colonization? Here's my response. Hi guys, welcome to my channel. All I do is sit on my couch, comfortable, relaxed, and I talk about whatever, and I discuss it with you guys. I used to do it without showing my face. I did not want to do it, but we are here now. So why did witchcraft not work? That's the creator's question. If you know the answer, you stitch it. I'm gonna stitch the okay, let me just shut up. Let's just get straight to the answer because I've been going on for too long. So my thought is that I think witchcraft is a belief that, you know, a negative force can happen to you. And I think as Black people, we don't even understand the word witchcraft, because during colonization, everything and anything that we ever believed in was bad, was evil, was witchcraft, you know. And in a sense, so that everything and anything that we ever did was rubbished, and it's called witches and witchcraft and buloyi, basically. So for me, I believe is a Western way of control to get people to stop believing in something that they held dearly and convince them in an invincible God, which is their God. Because for me, you cannot convince me that God, whatever they believe in, Christians, that they drink the blood of Jesus, they lick the feet of Jesus, they go on Sunday and worship the sun, basically. And you cannot tell me that is not evil. Your God can just decide that they are unaliving somebody and they can get away with it simply because it's God's timing. I feel like we did not give enough enough African mythology to thrive, you know, because I believe that Jesus is just that, a mythology that we explored, and we don't explore other avenues and other gods, especially if they're Black gods. We believe that these gods are evil and they cannot do anything, you know. For example, if I worship my ancestors, keyword worship also comes from the Christians' way of acknowledging an invisible being. And for me, I believe it's me communicating with my ancestors, forming a bond, and my lineage, you know. I believe that my lineage cannot be evil. It can never be evil. So let's stitch the comments. Let's stitch the comments, and I'll see you in my next video.
Stitch this reply if you know the answer. Why didn't witchcraft work during colonization? This is a question I've asked so often over the last like 5-6 years, and I've never quite gotten an answer that was satisfactory, at least to me. Because if witchcraft is there and manipulation of the powers of nature and energy and all that, how come I find no record of a single person saying we went to this territory, we tried to colonize them, and their witchcraft was so bad we couldn't do anything? It's always they've always won, and I want to know why didn't the witchcraft work then?
There's an interesting case from the US where a man was found dead in a refrigerator that had been unplugged. But the man had convinced himself that he was going to die because he was trapped in a fridge. And he died. Even though he was not supposed to, he died. For him, that experience was real. And as a consequence, he convinced himself he was going to freeze to death. And he died. So the moral of that story is that when something is real to you, when something is real to your mind creates it. You know, it becomes your reality. And unfortunately for our ancestors, the colonizers used that against us. You know, we thought of witchcraft as a weapon, but it turned out to be a pseudo weapon, you know. Yeah.
We look at colonization as something that happens to our material conditions. But what happens to our material conditions is a consequence of what has happened to us both spiritually and psychologically. There is a lot of buzz going on around this idea and this practice of decolonization. And it is often existing in like this academic ideological framework or as purely a political ideology. But what I think is that what needs to be decolonized is our survival instinct. I'm gonna tell you what that means and I'm gonna tell you why. Hopefully I can fit it all in this one video. So the evidence that what has been colonized is our minds, our bodies, right? We have been colonized psychologically and spiritually, is that look at the continent. Look at the continent of Africa, look at South America, look at even America, North America as well. There are many nation states that have been decolonized, meaning the Europeans that came and laid claim to the land, the resources, and the people have physically left. Yet, they are still reeling. They are still behaving, structured, and living as if they are colonized. Look at Korea. You see the evidence of the West, you see the evidence of being a colonial state of Japan all throughout their culture. Why is that? Why is it that even though the colonizers have physically left, all of the evidence, the practice, and the material conditions appear as if the colonizers are still there? And it is because we have been colonized psychologically and spiritually. The first thing a colonizer does is they come with guns, they blow things up, they activate the sympathetic nervous system of individuals and of the group collectively. That activation of the sympathetic nervous system by physical violence is what primes us for what is about to happen next, which is they are going to outlaw your language and they are going to outlaw your spiritual practices, all under the threat of violence. Brute force violence by the colonizers against the colonized activates the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the fight, flight, freeze or fawn reaction that puts us on a state of alarm. Once you've got a group of people on state of alarm, they are primed for the next step, which is to strip them of their language and to strip them of their spiritual practices, all enforced with violence. The threat of violence is constantly held over the heads of the colonized. Stripping a people of their language and of their spiritual practices are tied together. Our spiritual practices are inside our language. These really aren't two separate things. Inside our language is the capacity to name our experience in a way that connects us to the past and the present and creates the future, right? And so when you strip someone of their language, you are stripping them of the very spiritual power that is meant to protect them from colonizers, specifically in indigenous practices, which is North America, South America, Asian, and even in Europe prior to the creation of whiteness and the European identity. There are indigenous practices there, and of course in Africa. Native to these indigenous practices is ancestor connection and veneration. Ancestors are more than just dead people who you know who died, who are family members. Ancestors are our connection to the land that allows us and aids us in surviving our material conditions. Our ancestors hold the wisdom of the land, the wisdom of the seasons, the wisdom of the medicines that we need to heal us when we are sick, and they hold the wisdom that connects us to each other and keeps us in community. That is why another main feature of colonization is to disrupt existing family structures and ways of organizing communities and relating to each other. You can read more about this in The Invention of Women by Onyeronke Onyewumi. You can read about this in the book Yorugu by Marimba Ani. But the reason why witchcraft didn't work is because colonizers systematically, violently stripped the colonizers of their religious and spiritual practices, to the point, even now, you can see people who were previously but still physically, psychologically, spiritually colonized, still demonizing their spiritual practices the same way their colonizers taught them to.
Yep, today is your lucky day because I know the answer. First of all, the answer starts with a question. Way before they even started this colonization shit. Sorry about that. Way before they started this colonization, there already was a word, a name, and you've already said it, for that sort of activity, and the name was witchcraft. If they did not practice it themselves, they wouldn't have a name for it, which is different to the name that you use in your colloquial language, whether you, in my language, Tagat. So still they'd be calling it tagat, or the word witch or witchcraft would be a word which is derived from a different language, from a different country which practices it, or colony, whatever. But they already had a name for it. And how do you name something that you know nothing about unless you already know it? So that means they're only telling you that they do not practice it. But have you watched Harry Potter? Where is it from? Which country is it? Was that country colonized? They already had a name for it way before they started visiting other countries. So by the time they started going to other countries, they were practicing it themselves. Think about it. Come on.
Because shit was as it is today, where black people are just targeting other black people. It was not about white. As long as the other black brother is down, that's nice. As long as the next door neighbor is not going anywhere, they're happy.
To answer your question, witchcraft did work during colonization. In Limpopo, Venda, we used to have a king that was called King Mpepu, and back in the days they used to use a drum that was called Ngomarungundu. This drum was used in order to scare colonizers. What they used to do is they would take the drum to the mountain, they beat the drum after sacrificing, of course. They beat the drum, and the colonizers, they would have diarrhea and they would run away, and they would stop coming to the villages. But the drum ended up being lost, and unfortunately we don't know where the drum is. And also the drum was not allowed to touch the ground, so it had a specific place where it was placed. This is the picture that I found on the internet, and as you can see, it's not sitting on the ground.
This is my opinion. Colonization was the stronger witchcraft. Witchcraft, like every other belief system, is mental. So colonization used mental warfare to overcome its victims. A lot of people do not understand that once you conquer the mind, you've conquered the person. That's exactly what colonialists did. They made us believe that we were less, we were undeserving of equality, we were undeserving of our own lands, of our own homes, of our own languages, of our own identities. They gave us identities because they knew that if they could make us doubt ourselves, nothing that we believed in would work.
I can't say for sure like why it didn't work because I wasn't like physically there, but I have a couple of theories, and one of those theories is that Europeans were interacting with the rest of the world before they started like colonizing everything, right? So actually a lot of European philosophers and intellects and their educators got their information from Africans, from the Moors, from the Egyptians, and just from other African countries. So it wasn't like Africans never saw Europeans. They popped up and started like messing up everything. It was that they already had years of experience and interactions with each other. So the Europeans had some sort of trust from the Africans. Not to mention, since they were educating the Europeans, I'm sure they would have taught them about energy and told them about, you know, their practices, their beliefs, spirituality, and like the flow of life, which is how the Europeans knew how to disrupt the system so easily, because we probably were literally giving them the answers. And because they came in like friends, or came in like they're interested in the education and, you know, being able to take that information and develop their own society, what they did was they wanted to take what we had. And so by the time you get to you need to fight, like by the time they realized they were in a defensive situation, the Europeans already had the information that they needed to kind of counteract all of those attacks. I mean, when you think about magic and spirituality and things like that, it's not hard to know what to do the opposite of. If someone has an intention for you, if someone's trying to harm you, gathering protection for that, especially if you have the information, isn't going to take much. You just need to know what to do and how to set the attention for protection. So I think that the reason why magic and witchcraft didn't work during colonization is because they already knew our tools and they knew how to create the opposite effect, which is how we kind of got stuck the way we did. Because then they were able to start physically they started erasing that information from us so we couldn't protect ourselves spiritually. That's just my opinion.
You know, I think just look at your TV. Look at Disney. Look at every movie on Hollywood. Sometimes you think of witchcraft and you're fooled to believe that it's actually an African practice. It's not. It's invented by the Europeans. It was mastered by them, and you had no chance. They are the biggest witches and warlords that exist. The state alone just practices witchcraft throughout. So we really were not going to stand a chance.
No, sister. Witchcraft did work in the beginning. Look, I'm going to make this short and sweet. Actually, short and sour, because this tastes very bad. And before I do so, I would like to go on record stating again. In the beginning, the colonizers were losing to some African countries, specifically Ghana. The Queen of Ghana stood her ground when it came to fighting for people's freedom, and she won. But they're not going to tell you that. Introducing the mouth gag with a tongue blade, also known as the iron mask. You may ask, why does one use the mouth gag? And how does it work? They will just slap that thing on a slave to prevent communication. Abracadabra. Specifically a black female slave, because she was known to cast the spells. The crew was unaliving, the captain was unaliving, everybody was dying. That is return. How does it work? Well, there's a blade inside. Any motion of the tongue will rip them off.
I honestly believe the biggest reason for that is the missionaries that were sent all over the fucking world while colonization was happening. The way I see it is that witchcraft, or any type of witchcraft or magic, is always tied to either some type of deity or spirit or your ancestors. So the fact that white people would send missionaries to our countries to convert us was not by mistake. So this was mostly done not only just for us to lose confidence in our own religions, it was also done for our own religions to lose their power, because everybody knows for our ancestors to have power, we have to pray to them or give them offerings and so on and so forth. So for them to take our worship or our religion away from us was literally stripping our ancestors from their source of power. And this isn't to say that people weren't trying. I'm just saying that the majority of people, and thus the majority of where the power was coming from, were converting. So even though like the practitioners and all of the people who had this in their bloodline, they would have still practiced. But if the common everyday person stops practicing, then that takes away a big chunk of the power that witchcraft would have had back in the day. So I honestly feel like that it was a systemic thing to shut down the powers of witchcraft, if not to say it like that. If you have any more questions, please, I am more than willing to talk about this stuff. I am very lonely. Please send me some questions.